with, but there's too much that has to get done with the U.S. working with its allies that this is going to not have a long-term impact. And that's basically, what President Biden said. He said, this isn't, it's consequential, but it's not going to change the course of U.S. relations with its allies.
So it's kind of a pie in the face moment for the U.S. vis-a-vis its allies.
It's somewhere between a pie on the face and an anvil on the head.
Somewhere in between there is the sweet spot.
It's closer to pie on the face, but it's not Wile E. Coyote getting the anvil on the head.
Oh, you're going back to a Saturday morning's cartoon reference. Love you. Talking about the DBS. Some DBS loans. Take us through what happened with that. They've got a problem on their hands.
Well, this is another example of ESG in action. This is an example where when you are financing, and it doesn't matter if you own the company directly, or through stock, if it's privately held through private equity or venture capital, or if you are financing it through loans, you are going to be held to a standard of what is that money doing. And in this instance, DBS was one of 11 banks that was giving loans to a company in Australia called Santos. And this company, Santos, is building a controversial gas project that the native Australians say threaten their traditional lands and sea, the future of their culture, and they are suing to block this project from happening, and they're bringing in the financiers into this, even though they're not directly financing the project.
Now, on a superficial level, it looks like such an obvious PR goal. Putting your ESG McClarty Associates hat on for a second, how does this keep happening? I sound like a broken record. I suppose the argument would be DBS Bank invests in a lot of places, a lot of companies. Why wasn't this discovered earlier? Why wasn't the link in the chain spotted earlier?
Well, I mean, and this is the question: is where are you going to hold banks who are doing these types of loans responsible? If you have a company like Santos, which has many different projects going on, and are you allowed to give them a loan for one project that wouldn't be objectionable under your, what they would call their group responsible financing standards? Or do you look at it project by project? It gets very difficult when you have loan banks of billions and billions and billions of dollars. Where is the line going to be drawn? And what we're seeing now is that from a ESG perspective, people are going to be held a lot more responsible for financing than they had been in the past. Whether this lawsuit is credible, whether there's a credible claim against DBS legally, but then there's also the reputational issues that banks now have to deal with that they never had to deal with before.
Yeah, many organizations, not just banks, but other organizations who had investments, for example, in coal projects or dams or things like this that were deemed or thought to be environmentally not favorable. I'll put it in the mildest terms. Many of them have said, look, it's going to take us years to decouple from these investments. We can't just say tomorrow we're cutting off the funding. Is this a similar situation here with not just DBS, but in general? The financing world has got projects wrapped up for decades to come.
Okay, there's two different issues. The first issue that you deal with from an environmental perspective and from a energy transition net zero perspective is, are there asset classes you should not be involved with at all? And so the question is, should we be financing coal? And some people will say, no, you shouldn't finance coal at all because of what it is contributing in terms of the temperature rise that we're facing. Others say, well, wait a second, we just can't stop financing coal because while that may have an environmental benefit, that is going to have a huge social cost. It's going to cost people jobs. It's going to cost people their electricity. It's going to cost people their education. And we have to balance off between the E and the S. This is not that issue. This is a very specific project where a group of Australians, native Australians, has said this specific project is harming our indigenous rights. Therefore, forget coal, forget energy. It is this project that we object to. And so what banks need to do, what private equity needs to do, what venture capital needs to do, what corporates need to do is be able to get to the project level and then be able to connect the dots. So this is a different debate over whether or not we should be investing in coal, financing energy projects. It's should DBS and the 10 other banks that are involved be financing this. And what UOB said, UOB, which is one of the banks as well, not just DBS, UOB said, because we do not have direct exposure to this project, this doesn't fit within our analysis. But if you're financing a company, how do you know which project is getting which loan? And it all comes together. And this is what's making ESG very difficult for banks, especially to do when they're financing as opposed to providing equity.
Brilliant stuff. Now, before we wrap this up, tell us about your T-shirt.
Oh, so it was it just so happened by chance that I had to be in New York for a conference, and Billy Joel played Sunday night before the conference started. And depressingly, I figured out that this was the 5th decade I have seen Billy Joel. So I've seen Billy Joel in the 80s, 90s, aughts, 10s, and 20s. And then it just so happened that at the back end of the conference, Bruce Springsteen was playing in Brooklyn. And I'm only in the low double digits for Bruce concerts. My brother flew out from California, and so we were there together. And he's about 180 concerts for Bruce or so. And Bruce is still, amazing. Now he's down to 2 hours and 50 minutes. So it wasn't quite the 3.5-hour concerts I used to see, when I see Bruce back 30 years ago or so. But still just amazing.
Sorry, Steve, but I'd rather talk to your brother. That sounds extraordinary.
Let's get him on, actually.
But yeah, I'm serious. Nearly 200.
Nearly 200. And now, my brother, when he got married, he did his honeymoon in Australia because Bruce happened to be playing in Melbourne and Sydney for that tour. So I joined my brother and his wife on their honeymoon in Sydney, and we saw Bruce.
That's like a third wheel. Jeez.
Yeah, let's get him on the show.